"This child isn't yours." Those 5 words hit me harder than a swinging sledgehammer. I looked her dead in the eye and called her exactly what she was, a treacherous witch. But look, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up a bit. This story is a hell of a ride, the kind where a single moment can level a life that looks rock solid on the outside, but is actually built on a foundation of lies. Part 1. The Foundation. I'm 38 years old, and I didn't get where I am by having things handed to me. I crawled my way up from nothing to running the top construction outfit in Cedar Falls. I started out as a common laborer with calloused hands and an empty wallet, but these days, I'm overseeing more than 200 workers across 3 states. We handle multi-million-dollar projects every year. You could say I'm the textbook definition of the American dream. Hard work, discipline, and a relentless drive turned me from a nobody into a wealthy contractor. 15 years ago, I married Vanessa Whitmore. She's 35 now, and for as long as I can remember, she was considered the prize of this town. She's a sharp blonde and the daughter of a former mayor. She carried that old family name with pride, even though the actual moody fortune had dried up long before I came into the picture. Angela played the part of a rich man's wife perfectly, hosting charity dinners, throwing grand parties, and managing our estate on Maple Ridge like she was born for that life. Then there's Lucas Caldwell, our 14-year-old. The kid is my spitting image. He's got my grit and his mother's brains, and he's killing it in school and sports. I've coached his baseball team for years, and we've spent countless weekends out in the garage together, building everything from birdhouses to solid oak tables. Those father-son projects became a tradition I really cherished, even while Angela started drifting away, always too busy with her high society social circles to join us. When Angela told me she was pregnant 6 months ago, it felt like a total miracle. We'd been married for 14 years and had gone through several miscarriages that really took an emotional toll on her. We'd eventually made our peace with the idea that Lucas Caldwell would be our only child, and we were grateful for the family we had. But the second she broke the news, something felt off. During this pregnancy, Angela turned into someone I barely recognized. She used to be warm and involved, but she became cold and distant. She stopped talking to me about her choices and started disappearing for hours at a time. She'd give me these weak excuses for where she'd been, but she never had any shopping bags to back up her stories. She was buying expensive things for no reason and taking private calls, wearing this secret little smile that definitely wasn't meant for me. My business partner and best friend since high school, Brandon Hayes, manages the money while I'm out on the job sites. He started noticing things too. His wife, Melissa Hayes, once spotted Angela in a cafe, leaned in real close to some stranger no one knew. When Melissa Hayes waved, Angela flinched like she'd been caught red-handed. She was constantly glued to her phone, her face lighting up like she was texting someone she cared about way more than she should. "Man, something's wrong," Chuck told me one Friday while we were grabbing a few beers. "Melissa Hayes says she's out at weird hours, acting jumpy and looking over her shoulder." I just brushed it off. I told myself it was just hormones and the stress of the pregnancy. At 35, the doctors call it advanced maternal age, which comes with higher risks and a heavy emotional load. After losing so many pregnancies before, I figured she was just fragile and being extra cautious. I thought she was just struggling to process this late-life surprise. The morning of the standard ultrasound, Angela was way more nervous than usual. She just pushed her food around her plate without eating a bite and kept checking the mirror like she was hunting for flaws. She didn't look happy. She looked like she was filled with dread. When I suggested we grab lunch afterward to celebrate seeing the baby, she just gave me a weak nod. The spark was gone. Our doctor, Victor Langford, has looked after our family for over 10 years. He's in his 60s, got silver hair at his temples, and has a kind of soft-spoken way about him that makes you feel at ease. He's brought dozens of kids into the world here in Cedar Falls, and his name carries a lot of weight for being honest and compassionate. Because of Angela's history and her age, he'd been keeping a very close watch on this pregnancy. I was sitting in his waiting room, half focused on my phone, scrolling through emails about our biggest contract yet, a high-end hotel project that was going to make Atkinson Construction the go-to builder for the whole region. Chuck had sent me a note about an investor named Adrian Cole, who was asking questions about us. I made a mental note to look into it later, since business growth was always on my mind. Then Harrington walked out, and he looked absolutely shattered. His usual steady manner was gone. His hands were shaking, and his face was pale. He asked me to step into his office, shut the door, and started pacing like he didn't know how to break the news. "Jared, what I'm about to tell you is very hard, but you need the truth," he said, looking at me with eyes that felt heavy. "The scan shows the baby's growth doesn't match the dates Angela gave us. The exact numbers point to conception about 26 weeks ago, not 23. The words didn't really sink in at first. My voice cracked when I asked him, "What exactly does that mean?" "It means this baby couldn't have been conceived during the time you and Angela were together," he explained, steady but grim. "Looking at your wife's medical records and what we talked about regarding your schedule, you were away in Denver during the actual window of conception." Denver, the biggest contract we'd ever taken on. I'd lived there for nearly 3 weeks straight back in January, working 18-hour days to make sure every single detail was perfect. Every night I'd called Angela, counting down the days until I could come home and be with her. "Doctor, are you sure? There's no mistake in the math?" My words felt hollow because, deep down, I already knew the answer. He nodded firmly. "I've run the calculations 3 separate times, Jared. There's no doubt. The baby's growth lines up perfectly with conception while you were away in Denver." Everything I thought I knew about my life was about to change, but I had no idea just how deep the betrayal really went. It felt like the floor was falling out from under me. 15 years of marriage, a whole life I thought I knew, just disintegrated under the cold, fluorescent lights of that office. Every one of Angela's recent moods, those hushed phone calls and that icy distance between us suddenly clicked into place like a puzzle I never wanted to solve. Dr. Harrington didn't look away. He watched me with a look that was half pity and half pure fire on my behalf. He told me straight up that I was a good man and deserved better than this pack of lies. He advised me to walk out right then and find a lawyer before Angela could find a way to twist the story. But I'm not the kind of guy who moves without seeing the structural damage for myself. I asked to see the data. He hesitated for a second, then turned the monitor my way. There it was, laid out in cold, hard numbers. Bone length, organ development. Every bit of biological evidence proved that kid was conceived exactly when I was hundreds of miles away. The baby was growing just fine, but the truth was written in every line of that chart. There was no way in hell that child was mine. The confrontation. I walked back into the exam room, and the air felt heavy. Angela was lying there with tear tracks on her cheeks, staring up at the ceiling. She looked like someone who had been waiting for the floor to give way. She knew she'd been caught. I looked at Dr. Harrington and told him, "Show her." My voice was quiet, scary quiet, even to me. Angela finally turned her head, her eyes wide and wet with a kind of fear I'd never seen in her. She started with the, "Jared, please, let me explain," but I cut her off before she could get ahead of steam. I told her flat out that there was no talking her way out of this one. I spent another minute just staring at that ultrasound screen, burning the evidence into my memory. This was the proof that would change everything. I looked at the woman I'd loved for 15 years, the mother of my son, and the person who had just torched our entire world. "We're going home," I said, keeping a lid on the absolute rage boiling in my gut. I told her we were going to have a very long, very detailed talk, and she was going to tell me exactly who the guy was and how long she'd been playing me for a fool. I watched the color drain right out of her face. She knew the game was up. The investigation. That night, I made a choice that probably kept me out of a jail cell. Instead of losing my cool or screaming at the walls, I got systematic. I built my business by planning every move and paying attention to the smallest details, and it was time to handle this disaster the same way. I pulled out my laptop and went to work. My first target was a guy named Adrian Cole. It only took a few minutes to find out he was the new big shot in Cedar Falls. He ran the Jennings Development Group, and his website was full of glossy photos of luxury properties and him looking like $1,000,000. He had that polished, fake look that always rubbed me the wrong way. Perfect white teeth, designer suits, and a smile that felt like it was rehearsed in a mirror. Digging into his background, I found out he was married to a high-powered attorney named Samantha, had twin daughters, and lived in a mansion in the best part of the city. The guy was out there playing Family Man of the Year, while systematically wrecking 2 different families. It was enough to make a man sick. Uncovering the plot. For the next week, I kept my head down and played my part. I told my partner Chuck that Angela was having some pregnancy complications and needed to stay low, which explained why I was distracted and why she wasn't at any of the usual town events. Chuck's a loyal guy. He picked up the slack at the firm without asking a single question. Meanwhile, I hired a pro named Daniel Mercer. He's a former detective who does private eye work, specifically the kind involving cheating spouses. The man is a ghost, and he gets results. Within 3 days, Paul handed me a folder that laid it all out. Angela and Marcos had been shacking up at the Grandview Hotel twice a week for the last 8 months. He had everything: photos with timestamps, phone logs, and even bank records. The worst part? Angela was using the money from our joint account to pay for their little love nest. She'd tell me she was going shopping or visiting her sister, then drive 40 minutes to meet this guy in a suite that cost more per night than most people earn in a week. But it got even darker. Paul found out they weren't just having an affair. They were planning a full-scale heist. Their exit strategy was calculated down to the penny. Angela was going to wait until the baby was born, then hit me with a divorce. She planned to use the local laws to walk away with half of the company I'd spent 15 years building from the dirt up. They'd already put a deposit down on a luxury penthouse in the city and were looking into private schools for their new family. The level of betrayal was staggering. This wasn't just a mistake or a moment of weakness. This was a cold-blooded plan to ruin me financially while I was busy thinking I was going to be a father again. Even while she was planning my destruction, she had the gall to ask me what color we should paint the nursery. She was playing the devoted wife to my face while holding a knife behind her back, just waiting for the right moment to twist it. I had all the proof I needed. Now, I just had to decide how to use it. Any respect I still had for Angela evaporated right then and there. Watching her play the part of the glowing, expectant mother was like watching a masterclass in deception. It turns out the woman I'd spent 15 years with was a world-class manipulator, able to look me right in the eye and lie about the very foundation of our lives without blinking. But I wasn't done digging. If we were going to war, I needed enough ammunition to make sure there was nothing left of the opposition when the smoke cleared. The meeting. Through the work my PI Paul was doing, I found out that Adrian Cole was more than just a guy with a wandering eye. He was a straight-up criminal whose business was a house of cards. I set up a meeting with him under the guise of a potential partnership. Atkinson Construction has a big enough name that any developer would jump at the chance to work with us. Marcos was all too eager to brag. He started spilling details about his projects, inadvertently admitting to a laundry list of illegal cost-cutting and regulatory dodging. Sometimes you just have to get a little creative with the environmental folks, he told me with a wink, like we were 2 outlaws sharing a secret. He honestly thought he was impressing some small-town builder with his flexibility on impact studies and his connections in the regulatory agencies. I just nodded along, looking interested, while my phone in my pocket recorded every single word he said. Documenting the rot. The following week, I played the part of the interested partner and visited 3 of his job sites. I brought a camera and the eye of a man who knows exactly how a building is supposed to be put together. What I found was sickening. I documented everything: safety violations that put his crews in danger, environmental damage that would make a federal agent's head spin, and building code shortcuts that compromised the actual integrity of the structures. I even caught wind of local inspectors being paid off to look the other way. Marcos had built his empire on a foundation of fraud and negligence. He didn't care about the people living in those buildings. He only cared about the profit margin. While I was gathering dirt on him, I sat down with my lawyer and old friend, Stephen Calloway. We needed to put a bulletproof vest on Atkinson Construction. I told him I wanted every asset, the business, the house, and especially Lucas Caldwell's college fund, shielded from any potential divorce fallout. Jeffrey didn't ask why I wanted the most aggressive asset protection strategy allowed in Connecticut. He just got to work. The 3 phases of demolition. 2 weeks after that ultrasound, I was ready to pull the trigger. In construction, I usually build things that last. This time, I was planning a controlled demolition of the people who tried to burn me. Phase 1. I handed over a massive file to the EPA. It had photos, recordings of Marcos admitting to illegal practices, and proof of the environmental damage he'd caused. Phase 2. I made a call to the IRS. Marcos had been a little too loud-mouthed about his offshore accounts and unreported income. I made sure they had every detail they needed to start a federal audit. Phase 3. I reached out to Rebecca Cole, Marcos's wife. She was a total stranger to this mess, and she deserved to know the truth before her husband flushed their lives down the drain. The Alliance, I met Samantha at a little coffee shop near her law office. Mrs. Jennings, I told her, your husband is having an affair with my wife, and they're currently planning to walk out on both of our families. I laid it all out on the table: the surveillance photos, the hotel receipts, the texts, and that final ultrasound proving the baby she was carrying belonged to Marcos. Samantha was impressive. She didn't scream or cry. She just got quiet and sharp. As a family law attorney herself, she saw the legal reality of the situation immediately. "This is airtight," she said, flipping through the folder with a professional's eye. "You've built a cage for both of them." "That was the plan," I replied. "They think they're going to use my money to fund their new life together. They think they're going to take half of everything I worked for." Samantha's eyes turned cold, a look I recognized from my own reflection. "Not if I file first," she said. "Marcos doesn't realize I've been keeping my own notes on his suspicious behavior for months. With what you've given me, we're going to make sure he pays for every bit of this." The trap was set. Now, I just had to wait for it to snap shut. We didn't waste any time. Samantha and I sat there for the better part of an hour mapping out our legal moves with the kind of laser focus you'd expect from a couple of generals planning a frontline assault. She was set to file for divorce that very afternoon, gunning for full custody of her girls and demanding a deep-dive audit into every penny and property Marcos ever touched. She had the right connections to make sure the wheels of justice turned fast and hard, hitting Marcos like a ton of bricks before he even had a chance to start hiding money or spinning a new web of lies. On my end, I was ready to pull the pin on those federal investigations, all while keeping my own life's work safe behind the legal fortress Jeffrey had built for me. Everything came down to the timing. It all had to go off at once so neither of those two could find a way out or get their stories straight. Judgment Day. When Monday morning rolled around, it felt like Judgment Day, and I handled the execution with the same meticulous care I put into my biggest building jobs. Right at 7 o'clock, while Angela was still dead to the world and Lucas Caldwell was busy getting ready for school, I picked up the phone and made the calls that would bring those 2 houses of cards crashing down. I'll tell you, in less than 24 hours, the fallout was even bigger than I'd imagined. The feds stormed Marcos's office with a stack of search warrants for all those environmental crimes he'd been so proud of. Samantha hit him with the divorce papers and emergency motions that froze every dime he had, while his big-money investors ran for the hills to save their own reputations. On top of that, criminal charges for embezzlement started flying, thanks to the dirt my PI, Paul, had dug up. Angela had to sit there and watch her perfect escape plan go up in smoke as her knight in shining armor turned into a common criminal looking at a long stretch in a federal cell. When she finally got a hold of him on the phone, the guy could barely string a sentence together. He was panicked, rambling about how the feds had seized his life, how Samantha had locked the bank accounts, and how every investor was jumping ship. He kept asking how it all went south so fast. Jared happened, she told him, and you could hear the bitter realization in her voice that they'd walked straight into a trap. She knew then that I'd been 10 steps ahead of them for weeks, just waiting to pull the rug out. He just hung up on her, leaving Angela sitting in a cold hotel room, surrounded by nothing but the mess she'd made of her life. The aftermath. What happened next was fast, it was ugly, and honestly, it was the most satisfying thing I've ever seen. Marcos got slapped with 7 years in federal prison for his crimes, his business went belly up in bankruptcy, and the feds took what was left to pay back the people he'd cheated. His name is mud now, and there's no coming back from that. Come December, Angela gave birth to a little girl named Isla Cole, but she had to face motherhood all on her own while the baby's father was staring at the walls of a federal pen. The woman, who used to be the mayor's daughter, is working part-time at a local grocery store these days, living in a cramped apartment and trying to make ends meet as a single mom with a little bit of help and some bare minimum alimony. She'd apparently forgotten all about the infidelity clause in our prenup, which basically wiped out her financial safety net and left her with just enough to keep her head above water. All those dreams of high society living turned into the exact kind of hard-scrabble life she used to mock. On the flip side, my life took a turn for the better in ways I didn't even expect. The divorce went through, and Angela walked away with a lot less than she'd banked on. Atkinson Construction actually started picking up even bigger contracts because folks saw how I handled that mess with a little thing called integrity. We've expanded into a few more states now, and I've got over 400 people on the payroll. Lucas Caldwell was a rock through the whole thing, though I could still catch a glimpse of the hurt in his eyes when he thought I wasn't looking. We got tighter as a team, spending our nights in the shop and our weekends out on the trails around Cedar Falls, building a new life on a foundation of real honesty. A new foundation. Down the road, I found something real with a woman named Eleanor Brooks. She's a widow who moved here to be closer to her kids. We took our sweet time, 18 months of getting to know each other, because we both knew that a real relationship needs a solid base, not just a couple of lonely hearts looking for a quick fix. It's been 3 years now, and the change is for good. Angela's actually been putting in the work to fix her life. She finished community college and moved up to assistant manager at her job. I think she's finally learned that you can't just charm your way out of the consequences of your own actions. Marcos is still sitting in a cell with 5 years left to go, and Samantha moved their girls way out west to give them a fresh start, far away from the shadow of their father's crimes. Dr. Harrington's retired now, but we still grab coffee every so often. He told me recently that I handled that nightmare better than anyone could have asked. He said it was tough for him to break the news, but that we all needed to face the cold, hard truth instead of living in a fairy tale built on lies. Looking back on it all now, I don't regret a thing, not for trusting her in the first place, not for the way I handled the fallout, and certainly not for the consequences everyone had to face. If I have any regret at all, it's just that it took a total disaster to teach me the difference between the life I thought was good and the honest life I actually needed. The foundation of my life is solid now, built on bedrock instead of shifting sand. Whatever comes my way next, I'm ready for it, because the people around me are the real deal, folks whose loyalty has been through the fire and came out stronger on the other side. That ultrasound might have shown me a lie, but it ended up giving me the truth that set us all free to find something better. It turns out that even the worst betrayal can lead to something good, as long as you keep your head, play your cards right, and act with a little bit of strategy instead of just lashing out.